All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping in. Brandon, thanks for meeting with me and being here today. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Brandon. He is the owner of Structured Foundation, and we just wanted to come to you and kind of give you some tips and help answer some questions that pertain to foundation work. And so, Brandon, I've always heard that there is an estimate for offset measurement when it comes to the foundation. I guess sort of a tolerance, right, with regard to the foundation offset. What can you tell us about that? Is that accurate, or do you look at more than that?
Yeah, a lot of people want to use that word tolerance. It's not one that I use very often because there's no set number that you measure. That if your measurements are beyond that number, you have to do something to it. Or at the same time, if your measurements are within that number, you don't. There's really no such thing like that, but there is a guideline that we go by after we take a set of elevations, and that guideline is the American Society of Civil Engineers guideline.
Okay.
And I'll break it down for you in numbers. It's 11/16 of an inch over 20 feet.
Okay.
Which is about 0.68 or about 7/10 of an inch over 20 feet. And so that's the guideline that we use, but we have to be careful with that guideline because, again, just because we have numbers beyond that guideline, remember, it's a guideline, not a code. Just because we have numbers beyond that guideline doesn't necessarily mean that we have to put piers underneath it. And just because it's within that guideline doesn't mean that we don't necessarily put piers underneath it. So, what we do is we take an elevation survey of the property. We'll draw a footprint of it, take an elevation survey, and then we look at three criteria basically to establish if there's a problem or not. And these criteria, I would say, apply in most cases, although there are exceptions. We'll look at deviation in the elevation pattern first.
Okay.
We're going to look at stress on the house to accompany that deviation. That's the most important criteria because that tells us if and how it moves. So we're going to look at cracks, separations, cracks in the drywall and the brick, and separations at the expansion joints or the window frames or at the freeze boards, around the house. Mm-hmm. And then thirdly, we're going to look at that guideline and compare those measurements that we get to that guideline. So I may have a nice pattern set up where everything measures within a very tight range, and then I have an area of the house that deviates. It's lower than the largest pattern throughout the house. And then if I have stress to accompany it, and I've got numbers beyond that guideline, then I can look at that and say, okay, we meet the three criteria for having a problem. We need to do something.
Okay. I like that. I like the criteria. Okay. Well, that's good to know because, being on the real estate side, we always, we're always told, hey, if it's over this amount, then for sure you're going to need foundation work. If it's not, right, then, it's
not true. Not necessarily.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Good to know. Okay. So another quick question that I have for you, is there such a thing as normal settling? So I've heard sometimes that, hey, if houses in this area that you're going to settle and, it's just normal. And so you don't have to worry about it. Is that such a thing?
So it's normal for our houses to move, so to speak. The ground that we sit on is a clay soil, and that clay soil is expansive, which means when it gets wet, it swells up, and when it shrinks, or when it gets dry, rather, it'll shrink. And that's when you get the air cracks, in the soil and that kind of thing. Okay. Well, when the ground swells and shrinks underneath the house, that flexes your slab up and down. And that up and down flex can create stress signs inside or outside the house that may mimic a foundation issue, but it may not actually have one. Little cracks in the corners of the drywall, sure, and things like that, maybe even on the brick. Especially in a house that doesn't have expansion joints and stuff like that. That flex is going to cause some of that. Once that flex creates a crack in the slab, and that crack becomes a hinge point for excessive movement, and those cracks, if they develop, if and when, they tend to propagate across, the house to some endpoint. Yeah. Whether it takes a turn or it goes to the complete opposite side of the house, it may be in the front or the back or one of the sides. But once that starts to propagate and the house starts to settle along that crack in a way that it starts to create the damage that we look for that I mentioned previously, that's the point at which we have a problem. Okay. So that's the point at which the house is settling along that crack, and there's nothing normal about that.
Okay.
So, the old saying that, we all experience normal settling in Texas is not really true.
Okay.
Normal seasonal movement, yes.
Gotcha. Well, hey, this information has been very, very very useful. And so why don't you give everybody your contact information if you guys have any need for foundation work or you suspect the need for foundation work. This is your guy, Brandon.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So if you need to schedule something for us to come out and take a look, and of course we work with real estate agents all the time, as well as the general public, you can either call my office at 832-230-5490, or you can also visit us on the web at www.structuredhouston.com. So that's structured with an ED, Houston.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Brandon, for coming out.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me in.
All right. Y'all take care.